Hello, my name's Martin and I'm one of the school governors, and we've been invited to read a story to you as part of World Book Day. Many years ago I was a teacher and I always enjoyed reading to the class, and one of my favourite books is the one I'm going to read to you today. It's called Beaver by Nigel Hinton, and I'm going to read you the first and second chapter. And then if you want to, you could try and find the book yourself and read the rest of it. So chapter 1. Maybe none of it would have happened if Philip had listened to his father's warning not to play with the kite on his own. Maybe. But who can tell with magic? It's big enough to blow you away, his mother said when she saw the kite. Philip laughed. Nobody had ever been blown away on a kite, not even on one as huge as this. His uncle had brought it back as a present from China, and it really was the biggest and best you've ever seen. It was shaped like a dragon and was coloured red, yellow and green. Philip wanted to go out and fly it at once, but his father said to him he had to wait until the weekend. The weekend? That was 4 whole days away. Philip put the kite in the corner of his bedroom, but every time he looked at it, he heard a voice whispering in his head. Go on, the voice said. It's your kite. Dad's just a spoil sport. Go on, it'll be good fun. No one will know if you just sneak out for half an hour. For 2 days, Philip managed to say no to the voice, but on the 3rd day, he gave in. He picked up the kite and opened his bedroom door as quietly as possible. He tiptoed down the stairs. His mother was working at her desk in the front room, and he knew that she could see the street from there. So he went out the side door and along the alleyway at the back of the house. The kite was so big that his arms ached from holding it up so that it didn't touch the ground. It was so big that by the time he reached the top of the hill in the park, he was out of breath. Then, after all that, there wasn't even the slightest breeze. For a quarter of an hour he ran up and down trying to make the kite fly, but each time it just flapped back down to the ground. After one final go, he gave up. He wrapped the string into a ball and bent down to pick up the kite. A little puff of wind blew his hair. He looked up. A small, round, black cloud was racing across the blue sky. It was moving faster than any cloud Philip had ever seen. He felt the kite move in his hand. The long dragon's tail wagged from side to side like a dog's when it sees a friend. The cloud got nearer and nearer the sun. Philip saw its shadow come racing up the hill towards him. It grew darker, and Philip waited for the shadow to pass. But when he looked up, the cloud had stopped, directly in front of him, and directly in front of the sun. Its shadow formed a perfect circle all round him. Then, out of nowhere came the wind, whistling and spinning and howling. Philip closed his eyes. He felt his arms rise up above him as the wind caught the kite and lifted it. For a moment he thought of letting go, but there was a sudden tug, and it was too late. When he opened his eyes, he was already 20 feet above the ground and rising fast, straight up. He watched the top of the hill grow smaller and smaller until it was just a tiny green dot below. It was most peculiar. He wasn't afraid, and he was as comfortable as if he was sitting in an armchair. He looked down and saw the road he lived in. He was so high that the cars and houses looked like toys, even his house. He wondered if his mother could see him. In fact, she was looking out of the window at that very moment, thinking what a strange big bird that was in the sky. Then she went on with her work. Chapter 2. Soon, Philip couldn't see the town any more, and there were fields below. He saw a river sparkling in the sun. The fields became mountains with snow on their tops. He could see the little streams that started in the mountains and joined to become the big river that flowed through the field. One mountain was so high that Philip touched the shining snow on the top. And all the time the little round cloud led the way, and the kite followed with its long dragon's tail dancing in the breeze. The mountains went on and on. Philip could feel their icy breath rising up to him. His hands were becoming very cold. For the first time, he began to feel afraid. Perhaps his hands would slip from the kite, and he would fall and fall to the mountains below. He wished that he was safe at home. Already he must be more than 100 miles away from his father and mother. Where was he going? Would he ever be able to go home again? The more he thought about the danger, the more scared he became, and tears began to fill his eyes. He felt one drip onto his foot, and the more he cried, the more his hands and arms grew weaker. Then he realized he was crying his strength away. He shook his head, and the last tears went tumbling through the air. The cold froze them into ice, and the sun made rainbows in them as they fell. He smiled at the colours, and the strength came back to his arms. Below him, the mountains grew smaller, and there were trees on them instead of snow. Away in the distance, Philip could see a long line of blue. He watched as the kite carried him towards it, and he finally saw that it was the sea. There was a small stretch of golden sand, and then nothing but water. It was deep blue and crinkled, and the sunlight bounced off it with wild flashes of silver and gold. He looked at the boats that were steaming up and down the coast. The water was very clear, and he could see shoals of fish darting past the rocks and through the seaweed. Once he saw an octopus sitting on the pale sand with its legs rippling from side to side. Philip was so busy watching all the life in the sea that he almost let go of the kite in shock when he felt something land on his shoulder and tap him on the ear. It was a robin. "Hello," Philip said. The robin jumped in surprise at Philip's voice and flew off his shoulder and circled round him, singing very excitedly. Philip wondered what a robin was doing here so far out at sea. He was sure that the little bird would not be able to rest on the water like gulls and other seabirds, and he thought that the robin's wings must be very, very tired. He was right, because soon the robin landed nervously on one of his feet. He snuggled himself down on Philip's shoe and held one end of the shoelace in his beak so that he wouldn't fall off. He looked up at Philip, and it seemed as if he tried to wink one of his bright eyes. Then he tucked his head down under his wing and went to sleep. It's as if he knows it's going to be a long journey, thought Philip. The kite flew on and on. Now the big red sun was beginning to sink slowly in the west. Philip's father had told him how there is night and day because the earth turns. But as he looked at it now, the sun really seemed to be disappearing into the water. Soon it was completely gone, and in the dark sky Philip could see the stars. "I wish I could go to sleep like you, Robin," he said out loud. There was a rustling noise, and Philip felt the tail of the kite wrap itself tight around his body and his arms. Now he would go to sleep without falling off. He let go of the wooden crosspiece of the kite. For a moment, he was scared that the towel might not hold him, but he felt it tighten round him comfortably. And he knew that he was safe. He closed his eyes, and the gentle swaying of the kite rocked him to sleep. When he woke up, the sun was already warming his back. He rubbed his eyes, and it took him a moment to understand that he wasn't in his own bed, in his own room. It hadn't been a dream. There was the sea below him, with the morning light melting the mist that lay above the waves. He felt the kite's tail twitch round him as if he was trying to say something. Perhaps he was tired of holding on, or holding him. He reached up and held onto the kite. The towel unwrapped itself and fluttered up to its proper position. At once the kite changed direction. There was a movement on his shoe, and Philip looked down to see the robin waking up. The bird shook his head, flapped his wings, and puffed out his lovely red chest. Then he looked at Philip. He still seemed rather scared, so Philip gave him an encouraging smile. With a whir of wings, the robin flew up and perched on Philip's shoulder. Quietly, so as not to scare him, Philip said, "Come on, I hope you slept well." The robin gave a little bob, and Philip couldn't help laughing because it was just as if the bird had understood what he had said and was giving him an answer. The laugh frightened the robin, and he hopped a couple of times until he was further away from Philip's face. He stood on one of the folds of Philip's anorak. "That looks a very comfy ledge," Philip whispered. Again the robin bobbed, as if to say, "It is." Philip managed not to laugh out loud, but it was so funny that he had to laugh inside, and his shoulders shook so much that the robin bounced up and down. That made Philip laugh even more because the bird had to grip on very tight so that he didn't topple over. The robin's face became very serious and wide-eyed. Finally, Philip couldn't hold it any longer, and he burst out laughing. The robin jumped in the air with fright and started flying round and round. "I'm sorry, Robin. I don't mean to scare you, but it's so funny because when I talk to you, you bob up and down, as if you understand me." The robin had been flying round Philip's head, but now his wings stopped. He was furious. He opened his beak as though to say something, and then dropped like a stone. He had been so angry that he had forgotten to keep flapping his wings. Philip watched him tumble and roll down through the air. For a moment, he was scared that the robin might go on falling until it hit the sea. "Flap your wings," Philip shouted. But even before he had finished saying it, the robin had started flying properly again. Philip watched as the robin climbed up towards him. It was a long, hard struggle, and by the time he reached Philip, the little bird was tired. He settled back on the anorak ledge, and his tiny red chest heaved up and down. "I'm sorry," Philip said gently. "You can understand what I say, can't you?" The robin bobbed. "It's just, I never realised that birds could understand human beings." The robin bobbed violently and shook his head. "They can't?" Philip said. The robin shook his head again. "Just you?" The robin's chest swelled out with pride. The red feathers seemed to get redder as if the bird was blushing. "You're very clever then," Philip said. The robin bobbed and put his head shyly under his wing. "Perhaps you can tell me where we're going." The robin turned and pointed with his beak. Ahead of them, Philip could see two islands. One was very large and was shaped like the letter N. The other one was a small round island, just a circle of bare rock like an O. The kite dipped its nose and started to cruise down towards the larger island. Philip could see a dark green forest. and some open fields on one side of the island, and some jagged mountains on the other. So the robin was right. This was the end of the long journey. But think as he might, Philip just couldn't imagine why he had been carried here, so far away from home. It was magic, all right, but it was good magic. Or was it bad magic? So if you'd like to continue reading the story, it's Beaver Towers by Nigel Hinton, and I hope you enjoyed those first few chapters. Thank you.